In many places in our world, it's not enough to study the Dhamma, you have to practice it. You may know the sutras, but then these days so do the lay people. And you may make a quote, and lay people will look it up to make sure you're right. And also people will argue about what the sutras mean. But it is our job as bhikkhus and bhikkhunis not just to learn, but to practice so we can fully understand what the Buddha said. And in order to be able to do that, you don't need too many sutras, too much learning. I always remember in the time of the Buddha, the monks would maybe listen to one sutra, maybe two or maybe three, and they'd go off into the forest. They would meditate, they would understand those teachings and come back as arahat, just with one or two teachings. So it is clear to me that in today's world we have much learning but very little practice. We've read the Dhamma, but very few people actually penetrate the Dhamma. So even today I'm giving many talks, but how much are we actually practicing? In the West we call that information overload. We know a lot and understand very little. So in your practice as a bhikkhu, please keep it simple. Take a few teachings which you really appreciate and like, and just follow those. One of the great sutras which I always use in my own meditation practice is the Anattalakkana Sutra. Sometimes that we can look at these sutras and not really use them in their full power when we meditate. And the Anattalakkana Sutra, for those of you who've been to Perth, where I live, when I did a 6-month silent retreat, not speaking to anybody, not seeing any human being, that was the sutra which I took for 6 months to focus and contemplate. It's such a very powerful teaching of the Buddha, the Anattalakkana Sutra. You will know that that teaching created the first 5 arahats after the Buddha. So it's powerful, it's deep. That's all they needed to penetrate the Dhamma and become full enlightened beings. And when you look at that sutra, what it's telling us is that each one of these 5 khandhas, the Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara and Vijnana, these do not belong to us. If they did belong to us, we'd be able to say to any one of those 5 khandhas, "Oh, may my khandha be like this, may my khandha be like that." But he says you can't do that because they don't belong to you. So why in meditation do you keep telling your mind to be peaceful, to be still, to do this and to do that, when the Buddha said very clearly that cannot be done? So why is it when people meditate, they try to make their mind peaceful? They try to bring joy into the mind. They try to let go of things, when the Buddha said it cannot be done. So what does that mean? It means you let these khandhas go. You do not try to control them. You do not try to change them. So whatever you are aware of, you leave it alone. It does not belong to you. You cannot change it. That is the message of Anattalakkana. And what does that mean for meditation? I sit here and leave things alone. When I leave things alone, everything which I try to achieve through effort, through struggle, through striving, all those goals I try to achieve through that method happen by themselves. When I don't struggle when I don't strive, when I have no goals, when I do not try to change these 5 khandhas which don't belong to me anyway, which cannot be controlled by my will, what happens is they become still all by themselves. The reason why your mind is restless, the reason why it's always moving around, why you're thinking so much, why your meditation does not get peaceful, is because you're trying. I was going to say trying too hard, because you're trying at all. You let things go. You leave them alone. So when I remember Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, whatever I'm aware of, it's none of my business. If it's sloth and torpor, it's not my sloth and torpor, it doesn't belong to me, it's just sloth and torpor. I can't control it, it comes according to from causes. For example, 40 years ago, I was in Thailand in the jungles as a Westerner, getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to sleep with only 4 hours sleep a night. It was not enough. So when I got up in the morning, I was always tired. What do you expect? I did not have enough sleep. The food was terrible, did not have enough vitamins in it. I was in a climate I wasn't used to. It was humid. I think please excuse me, if the Buddha had been born in England and tried meditating in Thailand with those conditions, he would have been sleepy too. Basically, it was nothing to do with me. It was just causes. Just like the Buddha said in Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, there's nobody in here. There isn't a self. So who is doing all this struggling? So instead of striving, let things go. If you're sleepy, it's not my sleepiness. If you're restless, it's not my restlessness. None of my business. And many people think if you don't struggle and strive, the sleepiness will get worse. If you don't try and stop the restless mind, it will go crazy. The opposite is true. When you leave it alone, it becomes still all by itself. Rupa Khandha, Vedana Khandha, Sanya Khandha, Sankhara Khandha, Vijnana Khandha. It's not me, not mine, not a self. And in the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, it says, oh, may my sankhara be like this, may my sankhara be like that. It cannot be done, said the Buddha, because it doesn't belong to you. And when you read that and understand that, it means you sit down and let these things be. As I've been mentioning the last few days for those people who have been listening to the meditation instructions, one of the most important parts of the Eightfold Path is the second factor, the Sammasankappa, your intention, what drives the meditation. And the 3 sankappas, the 3 Sammasankappas, Nekkhamma Sankappa, just letting go, renouncing. Can you renounce your mind, renounce your will, renounce your 5 khandhas? As bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, you've renounced a lot, but you haven't renounced enough. Renounce your 5 khandhas. It doesn't belong to me. Which means they don't belong to you. You sit here, whatever's happening, none of my business. You can be kind, compassionate. I'm sleepy. Have a good night's sleep. If you are kind, you find you don't waste energy. You have more energy. You are gentle. You don't force your mind. Those are the 3 Sammasankappas. Nekkhamma Sankappa, Avyapada Sankappa, non-ill will. Ahingsaka Sankappa, non-violence. And it's amazing if you focus on those when you're meditating. That's all you ever do. Some years ago when someone asked me, I'm sick, I can't watch my breath, I cannot meditate. And I told them that is ridiculous. You can always renounce, you can always make peace with things, you can always be kind, you can always be gentle. But if you want your khandhas to be like this and be like that, you will never be able to do it. But you can always be at peace with them. You can always be kind to them, you can always be gentle to them, which means you can always practice every moment of the day, whether you're sick, whether you're dying, whether you're healthy, whatever. And if you do that, what happens is the khandhas start to settle down. The mind settles down. Because you are not fighting, there's not a war. Because you're making peace, you get peace. Because you're letting go, you are not the problem anymore, and the mind becomes very, very still. I teach this a lot. I teach this to lay people. Those who were hanging around me the last few days saw this. The reason I have a cup of water here is not so I can drink it. It is my visual aid, my example. I hold the water up and I say, my goal is to keep this water perfectly still. How can I keep this water still when I'm holding it? You'll notice that even if I try to keep my arm still, the water keeps on moving. And if you really try, you really concentrate, like I did yesterday, the water actually moves more the more I try to keep it still. Now that is your meditation, your mind. You try to keep it still, it moves more. Whatever you do, you will never be able to keep this glass of water perfectly still by holding it. And of course it's stupid, you should know better than that. How do I keep this glass of water perfectly still? You just put it down. Now as soon as I put it down, it moves more. That's an important point with meditation. When you let go of things, sometimes the mind becomes worse. Be patient. You've renounced, you're kind, you're gentle, and you wait with patience. And after only a few seconds, when you don't do any effort at all, you look at that water and it's perfectly still. That is the best way I can demonstrate how to meditate. You don't control the water doesn't belong to me. The water represents my khandhas. If I try and hold them still, they move. If I put them down, let them go, they're not mine, so I just renounce them. Then they become still, all by themselves. As Ajahn Brahm used to say, that's their nature to be still. It's me when I try and do something with my mind. I try and get rid of my sleepiness, try and stop my restlessness. I just make more restlessness. So my job is just to be aware and let it go. Leave it alone. And I watch my mind become peaceful all by itself. I don't do anything, because I, the sense of self, is the problem. It's one of the reasons, if you become a soul one, your meditation is very easy. There's no one in there. You know that. So who's doing the meditation? You stop meditating. But that don't mean you don't meditate. You stop meditating. Sometimes, because I'm a well-known monk now, sometimes people read my books, and sometimes I talk about jhanas and all these other things. And sometimes people say, Ajahn Brahm, be honest now, you're talking with monks. Can you achieve jhanas? Or are you just making it up? All that stuff which you write, can you do it? And I sit in front of people and I say, I have to be honest. Ajahn Brahm cannot achieve jhanas. I can't do it. I have to disappear first of all. Ajahn Brahm has to vanish. And then the jhanas come. Do you understand that? If I try and achieve a jhana, if I try and get it, there's this big thing called I in the way, trying to do things. So I totally vanish. Ajahn Brahm vanishes, disappears. And then the jhanas just develop and evolve. That is the way to do these things. So often that people wonder, meditation, the Dhamma. Somebody told me a few weeks ago that for many years they regarded these as two separate things. The Dhamma which you know, which you read, which you teach is one thing. The way you meditate is another thing. You meditate trying to achieve things, trying to control the khandhas. That's how you actually practice. But you know when you teach others, you know you can't do that. Somehow or other, the Dhamma which you've learned and the way you practice meditation have to come together. So anatta sanya, the perception of impermanent, a perception of non-self, the fact there's nobody in here, the fact that there is no one in control, there's not a person to attain Nibbana. For one whole rains retreat I taught my monks in Bodhinyana, based on the great poem in the Visuddhimagga. The path is, but no person on the path is seen, no traveller is seen. Nibbana is, but not the person who enters it. The path is, but no traveller is seen on that path. When you meditate, are you a traveller? Are you doing the meditation? If you try that method, there is no path at all. It just vanishes. The path is, but no traveller on it is seen. If you're travelling, no path. When there is no traveller, when there is no person meditating, when there is no person walking the path, then the path appears. So in practice, when you sit meditation, you can ask yourself, who's doing the meditation? There's no one doing the meditation, so please shut up. Don't do anything. Just let the mind do the meditation itself. You vanish, and meditation is so easy. When you're there, it's difficult. But you may not be a soul one yet, so how do you do that? Imagine you're a soul one. Just pretend. There's no one in here, okay? I know there's no one in here, just pretend, so I'm going to sit here and do absolutely nothing. But do it 100%. Pretend. And then you'll find how easy meditation is when there is no traveller. Later on, when you get into the meditations, well, first of all, I should make an important point. That see how this water is perfectly still here. That is the meaning of samadhi, stillness. Now there's a lot of Western-born bhikkhus here. Unfortunately, that somehow or other, somebody translated samadhi as being concentration. Please throw that translation away. That idea has caused so many problems in people's meditation. Samadhi does not mean concentration, it means stillness. If you have the idea that samadhi means concentration, the only way to concentrate is to use force. Just like you did at school when you had to concentrate on the mathematics or the German, whatever you were studying. That force doesn't have the subtlety, the peace, the stillness, the emptiness of real meditation. So, in the Thai tradition, it was never meant, it was never translated as concentration. It always meant stillness, quietness. The Thai word was sangop, quiet, still. And when I started teaching from that Thai tradition, rather than the English translation of concentration, I started talking about stillness. Some disciples from mainland China, they sort of emailed me. She was a professor at MIT, saying, what's the problem? Because in the Chinese version of the sutras, what is called the agamas, which are just almost exactly the same as the Pali sutras, they always translated samadhi as stillness. I even know that the word was guanshu. Guan means mindful, shu means quiet, still. And so even the Chinese meditators would always understand that samadhi did not mean concentration, but meant stillness. Just like that cup is still. That is how we meditate. Not to achieve concentration, but to achieve stillness. Once you understand that stillness is the goal, you understand why people fail in their meditation. You can't keep the cup still by holding it. You can't keep it still by forcing it. The only way you can keep the water still is by letting it be. Not doing anything. Not traveling on the path. If you travel, if you walk or do something, you find there's no stillness. If you disappear, let things go, stillness happens. But with samadhi, after there is stillness, other things happen. Stillness is not the end, it is just the beginning of the practice of insight and deeper meditation. When I was a lay Buddhist, living in UK so many years ago, I would go to any temple because I didn't have any choice. So I remember once going to a Zen monastery to do a retreat. And I was told that to meditate you had to sit facing the wall with your eyes open. Now at that time I was only about 20, 21, and I was willing to try anything once. So I was sitting, for hour after hour with my eyes open, just watching a blank wall, just a white wall. I didn't know why you were supposed to do this, but I had enough peace in my mind that I was watching that wall, and to my great surprise, the wall vanished. You were just watching it, and then it disappeared. And it was weird, but at that time, in the 60s, 70s, in Europe, anything weird was cool. It was interesting. And it's only afterwards I think, why did that wall totally vanish? With my eyes open, not taking any drugs or alcohol. Why did it vanish? And that taught me an important part of meditation. That your brain is only wired, it's manufactured only to notice things which change. If you watch a white wall or dark wall, any coloured wall for long enough, because nothing is changing, the brain turns off and the wall vanishes. Many people know that these days by just sound. There is an air con in this room. Now you can notice it. In a few minutes it will disappear from your consciousness because nothing changes. Stillness is the cause for disappearance. Things vanish when they're still. Even when you close your eyes to meditate, you may notice, if you're mindful enough, that when you close your eyes, the first thing you notice is the inside of your eyelids. That darkness, you're still seeing, but you're seeing darkness. And after a very short while, you don't see anything at all. The sense of sight turns off because nothing is moving or changing. Even sound, I said the sound of the aircon. Even taste. Well, let's use the simile of your saliva. Can you feel your saliva now? In your mouth, of course you can. In a few seconds you won't be able to feel it anymore. Why? Because it's not important, it doesn't change, it's the same feeling. When things are still, they disappear. And that is the reason why samadhi leads to insight. If you could look at this water, after a while, it will vanish. Because it's still and nothing is moving, they disappear. So when we meditate, we let things go. First of all, your body disappears. It vanishes. I am not the oldest person here, maybe the oldest person in Rains. And that means there's many people older here. I don't know what you were doing when you were young. You should have become a bhikkhu and a bhikkhuni earlier instead of wasting time. But I am old enough now to have aches and pains in the body. So whenever I start meditating, there's always an ache here, a pain there, an irritation somewhere. So when I sit down to meditate, the first thing I do, nearly every time, is just to be aware of the aches and pains in the body. Just to be aware and nothing else. And because that ache is constant, after a few minutes it vanishes. The irritation, the headache, whatever it is, you just pay attention to it and don't do anything, and after a while it disappears. And when you get as old as Bhikkhuni Kusuma over there, so if you find out that after a while everything vanishes and your body at last is at ease and at peace. I had to learn that, telling old stories. When I was meditating in northeast Thailand. In northeast Thailand 40 years ago, you think you may have problem with mosquitoes in your aranyas. In those jungles in Thailand, those mosquitoes were terrible. And my teacher, Ajahn Brahm, he was, sometimes I thought he was a sadist. He'd make us meditate between 6 and 8 p.m. outside under the trees when all the mosquitoes would come out. And together, in those monasteries we'd have one shoulder open. Sometimes I don't know what to do in Sri Lanka, whether you should have a shoulder open or a shoulder closed. I don't get confused, but over there we'd always have the shoulder open. Mosquitoes would cover your arms. And no exaggeration, I would have a game with another monk who was from the United States to see who got the most mosquitoes on their arms. And we count to about 60 or 70 at one time. And after getting to the number 60 or 70, you couldn't count anymore. The mosquitoes were too close together. And I'm sure I could hear them as all my blood was being sucked away by those mosquitoes. That's an exaggeration. But it was incredibly irritating to have so many mosquitoes on you. And many times you'd open your eyes and want to run away, but you see Ajahn Brahm and the Thai monks sitting there perfectly still. Now for you Western monks here, the Thai monks don't get bitten so much. It is just the nature of our metabolism that our blood vessels are closer to the skin because of, I'm not quite sure what it is, but you always get bitten much more as a Westerner than if you are Asian. That's just unfortunate. So the Thai people wouldn't move because they weren't getting bitten. I was. And it was such a very difficult thing to deal with. So the only way I learned to deal with that is actually to be so still that my body disappeared. And that was the only escape you could find. Be so still that the body vanished. So you could not feel the mosquitoes, you couldn't feel the arm, you couldn't feel the head, you couldn't feel the body. That taught me how to let go, to be so still that things vanish. And this is what I do even these days. Achy body, sit perfectly still until the body doesn't register anymore, it disappears. That is such an important thing to do. Otherwise there'll always be an ache and a pain somewhere. So when it's still, it vanishes. And I was always interested in why so many meditation teachers said the best meditation will be watching the breath. And for many years I used to focus on the breath, but I never focus on the breath now. I haven't focused on the breath for years. It's like the breath focuses on me, not the other way around. Because when my body vanishes, when it disappears because I am still, there's only one thing left which is moving in my body. The breath. When everything else disappears, that's the only thing left. And to me that answered a question why the breath meditation was so important in Buddhism. It's not something you do, it's something which happens when you let go. Your body becomes so peaceful, so still, everything disappears, and the only thing left moving is your breathing. And that is one of the hardest things to keep still, because it always has to move. Otherwise, you're not breathing and you might die. But what happens in the meditation, when you don't disturb it, you leave it alone and you just watch, not being a traveler, but just being an observer. Because you aren't doing anything, you are not using up energy. When you don't use up energy, you don't need so much oxygen. When you don't need so much oxygen, your breath gets softer and lighter. This happens naturally. You're watching your breath, not doing anything, not struggling, not concentrating. The breath is just there, and slowly it gets softer and lighter, until it disappears. And when the breath disappears, the whole body, at last, gone. Now there is a problem with many people when they meditate in this way. The breath disappears too soon, which means when it disappears there's nothing left to really watch. There is, but your mindfulness is not strong enough to be able to observe it. It's one of the reasons why, as a meditator, as a monk or nun, you should focus on the piti sukha, the happiness and joy which comes up in meditation. That is crucial to success in meditation. As you will all know, the Buddha said in Anapanasati Sutta, 5th and 6th stage, you have to develop piti sukha along with the breathing. You notice in all the other gradual paths, the Buddha said you should develop the happiness. And you will know that so many times the Buddha said, Sukhino chitang samadhiyati, from happiness, from sukha, the mind becomes still. And that happiness and joy is very important in meditation. So, when you do have a breath and it starts getting soft and peaceful, please cultivate the perception of piti and sukha with the breath. And how joyful it is, just watching a breath coming in, watching a breath going out. You can actually cultivate that. Look for the bliss, look for the delight. Don't just sit there and breathe. Breathe beautifully, delightfully. There's one of my friends, a great meditator in Thailand. Some of you may have heard of him. It's Ajahn Brahm. He is a monk who patted the king cobra on the head. In the jungles of Thailand, he was meditating one day with a few other people in the jungle, and this huge snake came to them. They all opened their eyes. And this king cobra lifted up its head, opened its hood, right in front of this monk's nose. I always like doing that. I always get somebody to go. Please, when you're giving Dhamma Desana, don't just talk. Do some actions, and especially to get people awake. Right in front of this monk. And with everybody watching, this monk simply got out his hand and patted the king cobra on the head. Thank you for coming to visit me. Could you do that to Palonga? Thank you, Palonga. Is it Palonga or Palonga? Palonga. Thank you, Palonga, for coming to visit me. Snakes love that because they get it. It's so rare for a snake to get a pat on the head. Of course, you have to be a great monk to be able to do things like that. So he just pats snakes on the head, and they love it. And after a while, this particular snake, after a while being patted on its head, it closed up its hood, went down, went to see another monk. Raised its head, opened its hood, and this monk said, "Go back to him, I'm not going to do this." But that monk's meditation, when he would ever teach, all he'd ever teach is when you breathe in just so delightfully, so beautifully. You breathe out delightfully and beautifully. That was the core of his teachings of meditation, to develop the Piti Sukha along with your breathing. It can happen naturally, but if it doesn't, you have to somehow develop the Piti Sukha. Be on the lookout for it. And when it happens, don't throw it away. Cherish it. Develop it. Because then, when you're watching your breathing, it's so delightful. You'll find when the breath gets less and less, what's left is the delight. It's not something you do. It's something which happens. And what is that Piti Sukha? All it really is a sign that your sati, your mindfulness, is strong. The other thing which I learned in meditation, it came from my teacher Ajahn Brahm, but I must admit I haven't seen any suggestion for this in the sutras. My teacher used to say, if you want to have a strong body, you have to exercise it. But if you want to have a strong mind, you have to keep it still. It is stillness which makes your mindfulness powerful. It feeds sati. Because what happens when you are still, you are not wasting any energy on doing things, on sankharas. All your energy is going into mindfulness, to awareness. You literally wake up. You become more aware. You can see much more. In the same way that you may have walked here early in the morning when it was dark, you can't see so much. As the sun comes up, you can see much more, but even now it's still early in the morning. When it gets to noon, when the sun is at its brightest, you can see so much. Now, because I'm a famous monk and you go on TV, when you have the lights on your face, they can see the fact that you didn't shave this morning. For me, usually, I don't notice such things. But when the bright lights of TV cameras, they have to put makeup on you. That was so embarrassing the first time that happened to me. I went into a TV studio in Australia to do an interview, and they insisted on putting makeup on. And I'm a monk. I'm a boy. We don't do makeup, but you have to do that. And the worst thing was that it was one of my friends, one of my monks, Ajahn Brahm, was with me. And as they were doing this powder on my face, he was looking at me, ha 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 ha. He was really embarrassing me. But anyway, why do you do that? It's because the light is so strong, you can see things you cannot normally see in ordinary light. And that is a simile for sati, mindfulness. When the mindfulness gets very, very strong, you can see things you don't normally see. And the mind is very powerful. And the sign of strong mindfulness is it has Piti Sukha. It is delightful. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, some of you prefer coffee to tea. Did any of you have a cup of coffee this morning before you came here? A cup of tea? Have you ever noticed that if you have a really nice cup of tea, you feel happier? The energy has created some happiness in your mind, some joy. Now that's, false happiness coming from caffeine. But you'll find that if your mind gets very still, the mindfulness gets very strong, and you also get happiness with that. Whatever you see, whatever you perceive, whatever you taste is more joyful. And that is where the Piti Sukha comes from. It's a sign your mindfulness is strong enough. You're still enough to get mindfulness becoming powerful, and with that strong mindfulness always comes happiness. In fact, the best indicator of the power of your mindfulness is the happiness. It's also one of the reasons in our world today people get depressed. Depression is a very low level of mindfulness, really low, which means everything looks dull and grey. Food has no taste. Nothing is strong or powerful at all. And also, there is no happiness at all. When you have strong mindfulness, everything looks beautiful. Everything is lovely. I told the story yesterday, and I enjoy this just to make people laugh. Whenever you get deep meditation and your mindfulness gets strong, everything looks beautiful. So when I was teaching a meditation retreat, and I was having some very good meditation, and the mindfulness was very strong and I was very happy, I had to go to toilet. And after going to the toilet, I just happened to look in the bowl. And I've never ever seen in my life such a beautiful turd. This piece of shit was just so amazingly beautiful. Just the different colours of brown. It's just not one colour, but it's just different shades of brown. And the way it's all put together, it's like some statue from a Michelangelo or Rodin. It's beautiful. And if you ever look in that toilet bowl, you'll always see there's always a tiny bit of mucus, which when it's mixed with the water, makes a piece of feces sparkle like a diamond. And then, delighting in the visual beauty of what I've just done, then I started to contemplate the scent. It was rich and powerful. And I like saying that because it makes a point and you can remember that. And if a piece of feces can appear so beautiful when you've got strong mindfulness, your breath is delightful. When I was looking at that piece of feces in the toilet bowl, you were just staring at it for minutes. You didn't want to take your eyes away from it. And as I said yesterday, it was only because I've had a lot of training in letting go that I could actually flush it away. If I hadn't trained in letting go, I'd have picked it up and put it on the wall in the frame. But you know how to let things go. But the important point was, it was beautiful, it was delightful. Now you can understand when you have that strong mindfulness, when the breath comes up, it is delightful, it is beautiful. That is a crucial part of meditation if you want to get into these jhanas. Find a way of not letting the breath go until it's delightful. Until you've got enough energy, enough strong mindfulness, enough happiness, so that when the breath does disappear, your mind is powerful enough, it's not dull, that you can see these beautiful nimittas which come next. The lights in the mind. People miss those nimittas because their mindfulness is not strong enough to see very refined things, the lights in the mind. When those lights start to come up, if your mindfulness is strong enough, you will find that you will have joy. And it's the joy which allows you to stay with those lights without needing to do anything. You'll find that whatever's delightful, you do not need to put effort in to pay attention. If I tell a funny story which is delightful, you don't need to focus, it draws you in. If I give a boring speech, it goes away. It's the joy, the delight which actually grabs your attention. Just like the joy and the delight of these nimittas, these lights, draws your attention. So you don't have to do anything. You cannot take your eyes of the mind away from these lights. And those of you who haven't had nimittas yet, it's because you haven't developed the joyful mind. Because your mindfulness is still weak, not strong enough. And how do you develop that mindfulness? Through stillness. There's other ways as well, through inspiration. It's a great source of joy in monastic life. That inspiration, I was telling all the people who've worked so hard during my retreat, you have all made incredibly good karma. Why is it that you don't use that? Why is it you have this huge bank account of good karma and you don't cash some in to get inspiration and get jhanas? So sometimes remember, deliberately recall all the good things you have done. The teachings, the help, whatever it is you have done. Recall that, gives you inspiration, gives you a source of energy inside your mind. It makes your mindfulness become strong. And once that mindfulness starts to become strong and powerful, you have happiness. Then you can easily develop meditation and develop beautiful nimittas. Be inspired. Find something to inspire you. Recall your good karma or the good karma of other people. Have a book with some of your favorite passages. It could be the sutras. The sutras are incredibly inspiring when you understand them. So you get a sutra, wow, the Buddha said that. And then close your eyes and meditate. You get this inspiration, powerful mindfulness, happiness, and then it's easy to get into the nimittas, and they're joyful. It helps to understand what these nimittas are. Because it was there in the sutras, but I missed it, like many people can miss it. You can read the sutras backwards and forwards, but still not understand them. You know, in the 9th factor of the Anapanasati, the Chitta Patisangvedi, to experience the Chitta. That's what happens when the beautiful, delightful breath starts to vanish. That's a nimitta. This Chitta is pabasarang. When there's no defilements, or the defilements are very weak. What on earth is this pabasara citta? You can see it right in front of you when you get the nimittas coming up. This citta, the nimitta is a reflection of your citta. That's what's happening. Body is vanished. You've got mindfulness, and what you're seeing once the body is vanished is your citta, the 6th sense. And if you have inspired yourself, got the energy, the citta is brilliant. If it's not brilliant, sometimes you can't see it. Your mindfulness is not strong enough yet. There's not enough happiness. So when you do see that, that's actually what you're seeing, the citta. And what happens next? There's 2 things which they say in Anapanasati, the 10th and 11th factors. It's abhipamojayang cittang and samadahang cittang. Abhipamojanang means bring it more joy. No pamuja. No, abhipamuja, there's just deep joy and happiness with that nimitta. And how do you do that? How you do that is developing even more joy and happiness. Now there's one trick with the nimitta I'm going to share with you, because this is where I've got my expertise as a meditation teacher. I know how to work with these nimittas successfully. When you first see a nimitta, it may not be that beautiful, but there is always a beautiful part to it. A part of that nimitta is more beautiful than any other part of the nimitta. Train yourself to pay attention to that. And that most beautiful part of the nimitta will sort of expand. And then you'll see the most beautiful part in the most beautiful part. And you focus on that. And then you focus on the most beautiful part of the most beautiful part of the most beautiful part. Always going to the beauty in the nimitta. Never going to the fault and what's wrong with it. And if you can do that, even monks with not strong minds can develop the beautiful, delightful nimittas. Even if the nimitta is what I call complex. I remember once just having the breath disappear and seeing nimittas as a scenery, like a landscape, like fields and rivers and trees. But I was smart enough to know what to do with that. I looked at that whole complex nimitta and try and find the most beautiful part. And what I did, I saw on one leaf, on one tree, there was a dewdrop which was sparkling. I went straight towards that, and that sparkle, that beautiful, expanded into this most amazing nimitta. And that was a good one, which I could take further. There's always something which is beautiful, something which is sparkling. That is what you train yourself to look for. And that expands and becomes a beautiful nimitta. That's what we call abhipamojayang chittang. To be able to make it powerful, beautiful, bright, and also single. So there's not many things happening, just one thing. Another important thing with nimittas, never worry whether it's circular or oval, because if you're doing that, you're actually focusing on the outside, the edge of a nimitta. Whereas inside and outside, it's just too complicated. Always go in the center of a nimitta, to the point where you don't know whether it's circular or square or whatever. For the times you used to watch the TV, or if you watch some documentary or some Buddhist channel on TV, have you ever noticed after a while you don't know whether the screen is circular or square or oblong? The edges disappear when you watch a TV because you go right inside. I often wanted to do asking psychologists, can you have say a triangular TV set and see how long it takes for people to not realize they're watching a weird shaped TV set? Or a circular TV set. Why does it always have to be rectangular? Get a circular TV set. After a while it will look exactly the same, because you just go inside and you can't see the edges. That's what we do with nimittas as well. Don't worry about the edges. Go inside. Because when you go inside, it's far more simple. You don't have to worry or be concerned about its shape. And also when you go inside, it's less likely that this thing is going to move around. There's nothing to move, you're inside. So when you start understanding that, not only are you brightening the nimitta, but you're also samadhahang, stilling it, making sure that nimitta is not moving. And you all probably have experienced nimittas which go all over the place. So many lay people tell me when they first get a nimitta, it's sort of on the edge. It's not really in front of them, it's like on the edge. And they go looking for it and it runs away. Never do that. You wait for nimittas to come to you. If it's over there somewhere in your field of vision, just stay looking where you are. And after a while the nimitta will come right in front of you. That's its nature. But don't go chasing it. Don't try to make it still. The only reason it's moving is because you are moving. For many years, many months when nimittas were becoming very strong, I could never keep them still enough to get into the jhanas. Again, I was doing things again. I was a traveler. I wasn't letting it happen. But one day, I remember just, how do I keep this nimitta still? Stop it from moving. And one day I was shaving in front of a mirror. In the West you can shave in front of mirrors. It's much better than cutting yourself. And I was shaving in front of a mirror, and I noticed, my face in the mirror was moving. And I realized the image in the mirror was moving because I was moving. And just simple things like that. The inside, you stupid mind, it's just too nice. You just can't resist it. The joy and ecstasy pull you in. So that's one thing which overcomes the fear. Faith is the other one, the joy and the faith. Don't be afraid, even though it's powerful. The other reason it's fiery, scary, is because you can't control it. Anything which you can't control, you feel is a danger to you. It is scary. But sometimes what overcomes the fear is either faith, or in my case it was just the sheer joy of it. Terrible when that happens, because it's like you just go right back to the beginning again. And you feel terrible about yourself. I was so close, stupid. That's what we do in the West when you call stupid, you go and hit yourself on the head, stupid. And that's the problem there with excitement. So you do that a few times. Blow it, because you get really deep and you get excited and it all falls apart. Until after a while, you realize, I'm not going to do that anymore. You just tell yourself, look, I've failed at the doorstep into jhanas too many times. This time, I'm not going to be excited. It's from those experiences I got this idea I called programming your mindfulness. To tell yourself at the very beginning of your meditation, if I get to that edge of jhana, I'm not going to be excited. I've blown it too many times. I refuse to get excited. And actually, you're giving that instruction to your mind at an early stage of meditation. So when actually you do get to that stage, incredible images, something's happening. Instead of getting excited, because you've programmed your mindfulness, basically you've taught yourself beforehand, when you get to that stage, that basically the idea comes up. No, I won't get excited. You don't say that, you just feel it. You won't get excited, you don't get excited. You can just restrain that excitement. And when you restrain the excitement, there's nothing to stop you going all the way into the jhanas. I know that many people, even yesterday, they asked me, can you please explain the jhanas? Basically, I can't. No one can. Because they're so different than anything you've ever experienced before. All you really say is what jhanas aren't, not what jhanas are. So jhanas aren't when you can feel your body. You can feel any ache or pain, it's not a jhana. If you can hear any sound, it's not a jhana. If you can make any thought, it's not a jhana. If the idea comes, yes, this is jhanas, it's not jhanas. These are very still, peaceful states. Unfortunately, actually good for in Sri Lanka because you've got a good grounding in the Dhamma. In places like the West, especially United States, at last jhanas are becoming respected and they're important. Even in these Vipassana traditions in the United States, they are now encouraging jhanas. But when I went to see people like Jack Cornfield and Joseph Goldstein some years ago, they're calling it jhana light. L-I-T. It's not real jhana. And those are states, and I'll talk about them afterwards in the next session, which are so strange and so powerful that that is what will give you sowan and all the other stages of enlightenment. You cannot expect an ordinary state of meditation to give you these incredible insights, called the enlightenment insights, the stages of enlightenment. You need something big to be able to really change your perceptions, to see the Dhamma. As one person in Australia said, you need incredible, powerful kick up your arse to be able to dislodge avijja. Remember, your ignorance and delusion has been there for lifetimes. It's not going to be given up easily. You need this massive rocket up your arse, and that's the jhanas. Please excuse my language, but it's the only way I can actually emphasize what I'm talking about. That will dislodge the avijja and make you see things in a totally different way. So, this is all about meditation. all about getting these jhanas. And basically, that's my main aim, to get as many people to experience these jhanas as possible, the real ones. The rest of the stuff, insight and stuff, you work that out for yourself. It's right in front of you. You can't miss the thing, insight, anicca, dukkha, anatta. You have to be really, really dumb to get into it and come out afterwards and not understand what the hell they mean. And that's where you can get these attainments from. Okay, that's enough for the first session. But I don't know if it's an hour yet, I haven't got a clock. But before we actually go off to whatever we're doing next, some questions right now. What I've said, it just doesn't really matter what you teach and how you meditate, as long as you get to nimittas somewhere or other and can be able to let them be and develop the bliss and the happiness. Those early stages of meditation aren't really that important, but when it gets to the deep stages of meditation, you get some nimittas up. Please learn how to deal with them and take them into the jhanas. But sometimes, in some techniques, people use a lot of willpower, and you can get a nimitta using willpower, but you can't take it into jhanas. You've gone in with too much willpower, and it's very difficult, you can't let it go. You're holding that nimitta. It's just like the simile of the glass. Some people are trained for years, they're very skillful, they can hold this glass and it's almost perfectly still. But they can't get that last step when it becomes absolutely still. There has to be somewhere of just letting it go, putting it down. The traveller has to disappear, sooner or later, for the path to manifest. You know, I think you can understand what I mean by a traveller. You are doing the meditation. That you are in control of the meditation. Now, and that's the most important part. You've got to let go somewhere along the line. Let go of control, let go of your sense of self, ownership, everything else. As I said, Ajahn Brahm cannot enter jhanas. Ajahn Brahm has to disappear. I have to totally vanish, and then the jhanas happen. Velamata Vihari can't enter jhanas. You can't enter jhanas. Velamata can't. Even the Buddha can't enter jhanas. The Buddha has to vanish, disappear. The traveller has to go. I think you understand what I mean, that sense of self has to disappear. And then it happens. And it's the experience of teaching other people that so often they try. They get close, but they can't actually enter the jhanas. I wonder they just give up. I can't do it. They give up. And then they enter jhanas. It's really lovely when that happens. Like a good example, one lady, you know her, but I won't say who she is, a Malaysian lady. She was on one of my retreats, 9 days, really, really kind lady, lots of generosity, and just been a Buddhist for years, done all of the dana and the precept stuff, really does keep precepts. And then she came on a retreat, and after 9 days, absolutely nowhere. No peace, no happiness, just a bit of a waste of time. And she was waiting for her taxi, which would come in about an hour to take her to the airport to go back home to Malaysia. And she said, well, it's not coming for an hour. I'm going to meditate and just kill time. And that's what she did, just killing time. Totally given up any hope of getting into peaceful meditation. Just killing time, nothing to do. And it was amazing. She got a jhana for the first time because she stopped trying. She was trying for 9 days, totally frustrated, getting nowhere. So she just killing time, doing nothing. And then it happened. And so many people, I know my own practice, but I'm a teacher now, so people tell me what happens. So I know this is not just personal for myself, this is what happens with everybody. You have to stop trying to get jhanas. Stop all desire, all wanting, which is the traveller going on the journey. And then when you do that, boom, bam, it happens. And then you understand how jhanas occur. So it doesn't really matter about the technique at the beginning. It's what you do at the end is more important. Now use those techniques to get close enough. There's a nice simile of the King Ajatasattu visiting the Lord Buddha for the first time in the Weluwana, the bamboo grove, with his Dr. Jivika. That's in the Samanyapala Sutta, the first part of it, where the king went in a chariot as far as a chariot can go. And then he walked, because he can't take the chariot into the monastery. Then he walked with his shoes on as far as you can go with shoes. So all these techniques are vehicles which can only take you so far. And then you get out of that vehicle and you use something more refined. And last of all vehicles, all shoes have to be abandoned. So that's a little simile just from the suttas. Okay, any questions, comments? Please, on these talks, please ask questions. I say this simile to lay people. This is from the Chula Kama Vibhanga Sutra, where the Buddha said to this lay person the karmic cause for wealth in their future life and why some people are going to be poor in their next life. The karmic cause of beauty and ugliness, and especially the karmic cause of stupidity in a future life, is not asking questions in this life. If you want to be stupid in your next life, then don't ask a question. When you think you're letting go, defilements arise. Have you really put the glass down? Have you really let it go? Or are you still doing things? Defilements only arise when you are bored, when you're not happy with the stillness, and you look for something to distract yourself. That's where the defilements arise. If you have happiness with a peaceful mind, no defilements can arise in you. No wants, no ill will, when you're so happy being peaceful. It is the piti sukha, the happiness with something like the breathing, which is the point where defilements have a very difficult time coming into your mind. So please get at least to that point. However you get to that point is up to you. But please get to the delightful breath, breathing in and breathing out. The mind becomes so satisfied that it doesn't need to look for sexual fantasies, plans, dreams, ill will, past and future. It doesn't need that anymore, because it's got its own happiness. This is one of the problems with monastic life. I think it's a Sandaka Sutta, says the consolation of monastic life. You can't have sex, you can't go where you want, you can't watch movies. There's so much you can't do. So why the hell are you a monk? Only if you get the happiness of either the happiness of the precepts, and especially in that sutta, the happiness of deep meditation. In that sutta it says the happiness of jhanas is the first consolation in monastic life. But I think you can say even the happiness of having delightful breath is usually enough to keep you on the path of renunciation. And these defilements just do not come up. Many people used to tell me that these defilements, they just come into the mind themselves. Just a thought just comes in. I used to think that until my mindfulness became strong enough. I saw that a thought doesn't just come into your mind. You actually go out and bring one in. You make the thought happen. Defilements just don't arise. You seek them out because you're not happy. You're not content. The mind is not at peace because it hasn't got the happiness with meditation. You look for happiness somewhere else. Most of the rules we keep actually are part of letting go. I've been a monk for 40 years now, and just these rules are natural. Just why would you want to break them? Oh, that's why you should have lots of solitude. So when you have solitude, in the beautiful, you're very fortunate here in Sri Lanka. You have caves, huts in the forest, where lay people can't watch you and see you. So there that, you don't have to keep your rituals and rules. You can take your robes off wherever you want to sit, and then you just meditate. So, fortunately as monks, we're not always in the presence of lay people. I'm probably in the presence of lay people more than any of you. But I still spend a lot of time by myself. So when I go into my room, wherever it is, I could take my robe off, take my angsa off and just sit down, and no one's watching me. And I can have any posture I like, whatever's comfortable. And no one's going to take a photo of me. Ajahn Brahm, you're picking your nose. I can pick my nose as much as I like when I'm in my room. So all this etiquette business, I don't have to keep. But when you're in your room, I was staying in this house and there's a big TV there. Who wants to watch a TV when you can watch your mind? It's much more enjoyable. So, you have all those things there, but you don't indulge in them because there's no point to it. There's no happiness there. And you've had enough practice as a monk, as a bhikkhu, as a bhikkhuni, that you don't break precepts because why should you? So all those rules, the main rules and regulations, they're the patimokkha precepts. They're just common sense for living a nice, simple, peaceful life. So you don't have to put any effort in to keep them. They keep themselves. Because please remember that we have all these rights and rules and regulations which are the core precepts. We also have the culture in Sri Lanka, which is different than the culture in Thailand, which is different than the culture in Australia. So if you come to Australia, you can do things you can never do in Sri Lanka. They're not breaking the precepts, but it's, like even me losing the shit word. Apparently you can't do that in Sri Lanka. But I've just done it. When you get a few more rains and you're a senior terror, it's amazing you can do anything you like in that area. And people won't criticise you, I hope. And anyway, if they do criticise me, it means I don't need to come to Sri Lanka anymore, I'll be banned. How can you stop your inner chatting? Why are you inner chatting? Because you're afraid of silence. We're afraid to be quiet. Why is it that lay people talk too much? Because they don't know how to be still. They're afraid of being still. In Sri Lanka, even the jungles are very noisy. There's always little animals make noise. But if any of you have the opportunity to go to the forests in Australia, they are really quiet. This is some of the quietest places in the world because there's not many animals around. And sometimes I notice when lay people go into some of these forests in Australia or out in the bush where there's no people for hundreds of miles, they always tend to raise their voices. Instead of ordinary speech, they start shouting when it's silent. And I couldn't work out why they were raising their voices when it was so quiet, until I realized that people are afraid of silence. It's challenging them. That's a beautiful little technique. You can use that when you're teaching lay people or teaching yourselves about how to stop the inner chatter. It's a really nice meditation teacher's trick. I tell people, I'm going to exercise it on you now. You can tell your disciples this. It really works, very simple, very quick. I start asking you, please listen to what I'm saying. But don't just listen to my words. Please be aware of the reaction to what I'm saying inside your own mind. Because as I am speaking, you will begin to notice some pauses between my words. In those gaps between my words, what was happening in your mind. You were silent and aware. And there it was again. It's a great technique because some lay people, for the first time in their lives, they know they can be aware without a thought going on in their head. Now you know what silence is. It's not that hard. There it was again. To recognize it, not be afraid of it, develop it. And the mind is often silent. Because it's much more delightful not to think. There's an old saying, which is, I like to call this the summary of the Four Noble Truths. When you want something more, you can't enjoy what you already have. It's a very lovely saying. When you want something more, you can't enjoy what you already have. For all these really wealthy people in Colombo and the world, because they want more money, they want the second billion, they can't enjoy the billion they already have. Because you've got nimittas and you want jhanas, you can't enjoy the nimittas, which means you never get jhanas. So enjoy what you have, which is nothing. And you don't want anything more. Then you have lots of happiness. When you want something more, anything more, you can't enjoy this moment. You can never have any piti sukha when you want something more. That makes sense to you? Craving is a cause of suffering. That's why for lay people I tell them, this, people have this big discussion, samatha vipassana, which is the right way of meditation. I say there are only two types of meditation. And I don't say samatha vipassana, I say the two types of meditation are second noble truth meditation and third noble truth meditation. What is second noble truth meditation? Second noble truth, craving leads to suffering. So that's second noble truth meditation. You're suffering, you're frustrated, it's getting nowhere, you're unhappy, you have just been doing second noble truth meditation. You've wanted something. You wanted to be peaceful, you wanted to be quiet, you wanted to be still, you wanted to stop thinking, you wanted to get jhanas, whatever you want, it leads to suffering. So this is second noble truth. Third noble truth meditation, letting go of all wanting. You renounce craving and it leads to nibbana. So I'm sitting here, I don't want anything when I meditate. I don't want anything at all. That leads to nibbana. Through delightful breath, nimittas, jhanas. So that's third noble truth meditation. And if you have a beautiful meditation, if you're enjoying the meditation, you ask afterwards, and you find you didn't want anything. You let go. So those are the two types of meditation. So please never do second noble truth meditation. Want. Do third noble truth meditation. Letting go of all wanting, all craving. Because you can't anyway. You don't own these 5 khandhas. It's like, telling the monk next to you how to meditate, trying to control his mind. Try telling the monk next to you, okay, sit down, let go of the breath, let go of thinking, go on, watch a nimitta, get into jhana. Can you tell the monk next to you, control the monk next to you what to do? You can't tell the monk next to you what to do. You can't even tell yourself what to do. That's the important thing. So leave the monk sitting next to you alone, which is yourself. And then you do third noble truth meditation. It gets very peaceful, very happy. Get into jhanas, enlightenment. So easy. Chanda, that's really a good word. It's a chanda. It takes effort to do nothing. It goes against the stream. To stop is a decision you make. The chanda. I'm going to let go. I'm going to do nothing. I'm going to disappear. Because it's not the usual way of doing things. The chanda to renounce. Renunciation as a human being doesn't happen naturally because you've been doing the opposite for lifetimes. That's why it takes a chanda. I'm going to let go. I'm going to renounce. Doing nothing takes will. The will to stop will. As the Buddha said to Angulimala, stop! And Angulimala stopped. Or this story I told, I think yesterday, this is from Wat Pa Pong in Ajahn Chah's monastery. Many of you may read books by a teacher called Ajahn Chah and you think he was so wise. I lived with that monk and most of the talks were as boring as hell. It was only every now and again he'd say something interesting, something incredibly inspiring. And the books you read now, they've taken away all the boring stuff and just giving you the best. It's just like when they dig for gold or diamonds. Most of the stuff they take out of the earth is rubbish. But amongst all that dirt and rock they take from the mountain is a few little diamonds or pieces of gold. They take that out, refine it, and all the rubbish they dump somewhere else. And that's like Ajahn Chah. All the rubbish was dumped somewhere else. And when you read his books, they're delightful stuff. But that's not what it was like to be with him. You sit for hours and hours and hours, bored out of your skull, and then suddenly you say something which made it worthwhile. So there was one little novice monk, 10 or 11 years of age, maybe 13, I cannot remember, listening to one of Ajahn Chah's boring talks, which was going on all night, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, no sign of ending. And this little novice started to think, I'm only a little fellow, I'm not like these big monks, I'm only here because my parents dumped me here. When is Ajahn Chah going to stop? And he kept on repeating that. When is Ajahn Chah going to stop? When is Ajahn Chah going to stop? And he did that for a long time. And then he suddenly turned it around. When am I going to stop? He thought. Just one little change of perception. When am I going to stop? And he stopped. And this little novice, when he opened his eyes, it was early in the morning, the monks had left hours ago. For the first time he got his first very deep meditation. He stopped. It's a great little story because he told everyone afterwards how he got into the jhana. When is he going to stop? When is he going to stop? When is Ajahn Brahm going to stop? When can we go and have a cup of tea? When is he going to stop? And then the novice stopped. That's stopping. Stopping craving, stopping wanting, stopping moving. He became still. Went into this deep meditation. Happy little novice. That takes chanda to stop. If you watch the body sensations, after a while they become very still and they disappear. It's not watching the body sensations, it's how you watch the body sensations. This is one of the points I'm reinforcing now. Because sometimes people do vipassana, and they do vipassana and suddenly they get so still, nimittas come up and they enter a jhana. It doesn't matter what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. So I don't care what object of meditation you're doing, even if you're visualizing a dog. Soon if you visualize a dog properly, after a while the dog becomes so beautiful, so delightful, and it starts to glow like a nimitta, and then soon it's just like many people do the asupa of the 32 parts of the bodies, especially, I don't know how many monks get these jhanas by doing just focusing on a skull. They focus on the skull, and they're focusing on the skull. It's supposed to be a supa, or 32 parts, or 31 parts if you don't follow the commentary. And then you're just watching this skull, and soon it becomes just incredibly beautiful. It starts to glow, fluoresce. It turns into a nimitta. And then from the nimitta you get into the jhanas. Was that a supa, or what was it? Or like the Buddhanussati. If you look in the Visuddhimagga, you cannot get jhana through Buddhanussati. But if you ever look at the Vimuttimagga, it says you cannot get jhana through Buddhanussati, but then it says, but you can. Somebody added that at the end. It's very funny to see that. It's as if somebody read the Vimuttimagga and sort of realised it was wrong and added another sentence. And this is what monks like Ajahn Chah used to do. They used to watch the breath with Buddho, 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 Buddho. And they combined Buddhanusati with the breath. And they got into jhanas. Imagine you're watching Buddhanusati, or you're just reflecting on the qualities of the Buddha, and you get so inspired, you get so much joy up in the mind, so much happiness, that the idea of a Buddha disappears, and so much joy, you get great nimittas. And then before you know it, you're in a jhana. It doesn't really matter where you start. As long as the body vanishes, thoughts stop, nimittas arise, bliss happens, and 5 senses totally disappear. Anyone from my senior here?
I don't know, sir.